Hello, welcome back. We are about to start Chapter 3. The Baseboard Mice. Button had once said to Lily that he didn't think the baseboard mice could talk. Perhaps they always know what the others are thinking, he'd suggested. Luckily, he'd never got close enough to find out if he was right. Now the mice sat silently in the darkest corner of the shelf and waited as Uncle Noggin's tale came to an end. So he picked up his head, squeezed it firmly back into place, and wandered off into the darkness, finished old Uncle Noggin. Then he took a gulp of his hot chocolate and watched the steam rise into the air. "Jolly good yarn, old chap," said Captain Crabsticks, putting his hat over his face and falling asleep in an instant. "Is that really a true story?" asked Button. He was sitting so close to the edge of his cotton reel it was almost tipping over. "Maybe it is and maybe it isn't," said Uncle Noggin with a yawn and a stretch. "Well, I think it is," said Lily, giving a sleepy grin to show how much she enjoyed being scared. Captain Crabsticks was snoring now, his hat rising up and down over his face, and it wasn't long before the stillness of the night nudged them all into a gentle sleep. Mr. Jegby, the spider, dangled by a thread above the snoozing pirates. He dropped slightly lower to get a clearer view, and watched as the pointed shadows of the skirting board mice came closer. Blue Vinny's long-fingered paws were carrying a bag made from a piece of old sackcloth. The mice swept down on Jones, the ship's cat, and bundled him up tight in the sackcloth bag. Then off they went, across the old books, down the side of the long case clock, and through the hole in the baseboard into their den. "Those sneaky mice," the spider mumbled to himself. "They have no shame." He twisted himself around gracefully and whispered back up his thread into darkness. It was some time before Button woke up. The candlelight was fading, but he could see that where Jones had been sleeping peacefully, there was now an empty space. Nothing unusual in that, Button thought to himself. Jones was a cat, after all. He wandered far and often, but as Button's eyes cleared of sleep, he suddenly noticed that in Jones' place lay a large blank envelope waiting to be opened. Button called out for the others. Then he picked up the envelope and peeled open the flap. Inside was a scratchy, scribbled drawing. "What is it, Button?" said Lily, as the pirates gathered round. "Cheese," said Button, "and I don't like it." "Nonsense," muttered the captain. "Of course you do. All pirates love cheese." "No, I mean I don't like this cheese," said Button. "It's a ransom note," said Lily. "Exactly," announced Button. "A demand for cheese, in return for our poor, helpless ship's cat." "Oh, I see," said the captain, his mind catching up slowly as they all stared in horror at the empty space where Jones had fallen asleep. "And you know what that means, don't you?" Button continued. "If we want cheese, we have to go to the freezing cold place where it's always winter. The place they call fridge." "But that's even further than the food cupboard," said Lily. "The journey is terribly dangerous, and even if we get there, we'll never survive the frozen land of fridge, let alone bring back a massive hunk of cheese. We've no chance." "But we have no choice," insisted Button, staring at her through the fading candlelight. "We have to get Jones back, before they decide to eat him instead." "Well, you did say you were looking for an adventure," Lily said, and she smiled a mischievous pirate's smile. "This is a job for heroes. A job for the pocket pirates." Chapter 4. Off the Shelf. There was a shout and a clatter and a terrible fuss below deck. Button's cries echoed around the glass bottle. Lily headed into the ship to investigate. A pair of skinny pirate legs were sticking out of the old sea chest. "Get me out!" cried Button. "What are you doing?" asked Lily, dragging him by his ankles. "Looking for this," he said, and showed her the rolled-up paper he was hugging tightly. What is it?" Lily asked. "Take a look," said Button excitedly. "It's the map of the old shop that Uncle Noggin found in a cupboard." The young pirates decided it would be easier to read if they flattened it out, so they headed to the neck of the bottle, but flattening it was harder than they thought. The map kept springing back together, and Button eventually disappeared inside it. It took Lily and Uncle Noggin to rescue him that time. Captain Crabsticks appeared. He was pushing an old box filled with thumbtacks along the shelf. "Crabsticks to the rescue," he said. "These should hold the pesky thing in place." Corner by corner, they kept the map flat and pinned it in place. Lily kept the thumbtacks still, and Button jumped up and down to bang them in. "Take that!" he said, landing with a thud. "And that!" "What ho!" said the captain. "Let's have a peep." They all stood back and studied the drawing. "We can head down the hallway into the kitchen," said the captain, pointing his sword at the drawing of rooms and corridors. "We don't need the map. It's easy." "No, we can't go that way," Button insisted. "Doyle's basket is just outside the kitchen. We'd be that gigantic mutt's breakfast before you could say blistering barnacles." There was a sudden knocking sound. "What's that?" asked Lily. "Sorry," said Uncle Noggin. "It's me." He was shaking at the knees. "I just remembered the day I fell in Doyle's water bowl," he went on. "It was awful." Button was only half listening. If they stopped to hear another of Uncle Noggin's stories, they'd still be here at midnight. "What about this way?" said Button loudly, pointing to the corner of the shop where he knew a broken plug socket was hanging out of the wall. It meant they could squeeze into the gap between the wall, and if they could get through to the other side, they would be in the kitchen. He and Lily had been to the kitchen before, but they'd never been to that cold and wintry place called Fridge. "Maybe you could stay here and look after the ship," suggested Button, turning to Uncle Noggin. "No chance," said Uncle Noggin. "I'm coming too. You can't do it without me. I'm Chompy and Jay's lifter." "Perfect," said the captain. "In that case, you shall join us." You're coming too, Captain?" Lily asked hesitantly. "Of course, my dear girl," he bellowed. "A good pirate captain never abandons his crew." Button looked at Lily. She said nothing. Both of them knew that Captain Crabsticks and Uncle Noggin would slow them down, but there was no stopping a pirate when they sniffed adventure. "We shall head out first thing in the morning," said the captain. They had to get Jones back, and quickly. And that is the end of chapter 4. So next we will be doing chapters 5 and 6.